Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. And if you enjoy the fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic.
What if Naruto was guided by Orochimaru, loved by Kushina, trained by Tsunade, protected by Kurenai, and observed by Hinata? Chapter 2. Sarutobi Hiruzen sat at his desk, taking pulls from his pipe. He was distressed by the information he was given. Both Jiraiya and Orochimaru had finally given him everything they'd known about the Akatsuki, and all the information provided lead to one conclusion. He wasn't the conclusion he wanted. This was supposed to be different. Hadn't he done this enough? Given enough? Lost enough? Was he really supposed to work himself up for this one more time? Was this a divine punishment for not faithfully living up to his ideals? For his past misdeeds, he was supposed to give the new generation something better. Maybe he still could. He tried to reason his way out of it, he tried to think of an alternative but stopped. That is what had gotten him into this mess, always looking for the soft option when sometimes problems required more. But there was so much to do and he'd have to risk the ire of the daimyo, but it was necessary. 2 letters were sent, one to daimyo justifying his need to stay in the chair a little longer. The other, to Rasa. The support of Suna would be most helpful, but if he declined, Hiruzen would have to make do. The course was set, allowing this Akatsuki free rein to do whatever they wished would be foolish, especially as he bore some responsibility for its rise. Orochimaru savored every poisonous word as she relayed how his refusal to neutralize Danzo led to another enemy with a grudge against Konoha. But this wasn't the time for guilt. He'd given himself and therefore his forces 6 months to get where they needed to be. After that, they were going to war with Akatsuki and AIM. Even saying it, war, felt heavy. It was acknowledging you'd be sending some segment of your forces to their deaths. You had done so before the first order was given. But this organization with its unknown agenda, outside of collecting the Biju, was too dangerous to allow to move through the shadows. He'd have to get Tsunade training more medical ninja. He wouldn't ignore the worth of that advice again. He'd have Jiraiya shore up his spy network, especially now that he didn't have to split his focus between Oto and the Akatsuki. Hiruzen wanted every bit of information they could get. So many plans, so much preparation. His village had gotten soft, too comfortable with the peace they'd enjoyed. In many ways, the village reflected his own decline. A decline thrown into sharp relief when he considers Orochimaru. She's had him beat every step of the way. He's been outplayed so thoroughly, it was over before he realized a game was afoot. But this last order, this is what she truly wanted. She put him in a corner and he had only one viable option. Jiraiya could train him eventually, but she was right, their skills didn't complement each other outside of a shared interest in Fuinjutsu. He hoped he wasn't damning a boy he saw as a grandson, and one that used to see him as a surrogate grandfather. He hoped that not even Orochimaru's taint would be enough to darken his soul, but this was necessary and Shinobi endured, so Naruto would have to endure this. Request for apprenticeship by Orochimaru of the Sannin, named apprentice Naruto Uzumaki, approved by Sarutobi Hiruzen, Sandaime Hokage. He wasn't in any extreme pain. Some discomfort, but he could manage that. A part of him hated he wound up back here, once again taken down in 2 strikes by a vastly superior opponent, but he was alive and had not been impaled, or shaven. He even has another legendary sword. So, all in all, a banner day for one Naruto Uzumaki. He's done a shinobi's work and deserves a shinobi's rest. The unwanted, uninvited and inconsiderate guest in his room doesn't share this opinion, he doesn't share it at all. How did you do it? I need to know. I heard you the first time, Uchiha-san. I'm sorry my convalescence has delayed my response time to your queries. How I did it is simple. Neither he nor his partner took me the least bit seriously, and I was able to delay them long enough for the freaking Sannin to arrive. So, I guess the real answer is the same one you got from the start. Why would he care about you? What's so special about you? I'm sure the, no offense, part of that is implied. And in response, it doesn't matter. I don't have anything more to say on the matter, so if you would please leave my room, I'd appreciate it. Sasuke realized he was being a pest. The redhead wasn't in the hospital for fun. He could have come back another time or went to someone else, but his need for revenge fueled the small bit of jealousy he felt for the Uzumaki. Itachi had told him he wasn't worth killing, but this kid, same age as him, is. Why? What made him worthy? In a moment of pique and childishness, Sasuke did something that was beneath him and even he'd admit was jerk-ish. He grabbed Naruto by what should be the collar of his shirt as he was still wearing his face mask and demanded Naruto answer his unasked questions. The villagers never beat Naruto. Never chased in, there were no mobs to duck on his birthday. As such, he developed a sense that even they thought physical violence was a bridge too far. That wasn't the case. It's just that attempts of physical violence resulted in immediate execution, and that was one of the few things Hiruzen was intractable on. Because of this, Naruto developed a rule, more subconscious than anything. If they never touched him, never vandalized his stuff, he'd just ignore them. He might dislike them, but he would ignore them. But no one puts their hands on him without response. He would meet violence with violence and not apologize for it. He didn't even bother to make Sasuke release his shirt. It wouldn't matter, and three hand signs performed faster than an eye blink. He demonstrated why, as his once languid hair were now crimson spikes long enough to impale the wall adjacent from his bed. However, there was no Uchiha stuck to the wall. Naruto-kun, that was a tad strong, wasn't it? Kakashi said, holding his wide-eyed student, quickly coming to terms with how close to death he'd been. He wanted to glare at the redhead, but the look in the Uzumaki's eyes dared him to. He shouldn't have put his hands on me, Naruto said, ending his jutsu and his hair returning to its natural state. He should not have, but surely the penalty for such an offense isn't death. Just break a leg next time, Kakashi replied with an eye smile, and Naruto nodded. Sasuke grew concerned as he wasn't sure if either party was joking or not. What the hell happened in here? Please no yelling, Tsunade Obeken. Then tell me why there are two holes in the wall that weren't there when I left. Sasuke and Naruto had a bit of a misunderstand, Tsunade-sama. I take full responsibility and will be disciplining my student for his outbursts, Kakashi said, pulling Sasuke away. He didn't want to be around an angry Tsunade. As the members of Team 7 departed, Tsunade ran a quick diagnostic over Naruto and was satisfied with his recovery but wouldn't let him leave. She was amazed when he didn't complain, just asked if there was a soft light available so he could read, which she had the support staff provide, and left him to his devices. He was on his knees gasping for air. His training session hadn't gone well. His timing was off. His balance was shot. He used to move with grace, now he plods. He has to fight his instincts, them telling him to use a hand that is no longer there. The phantom pains are still there, and in his dreams he remembers the sensation. It haunts him, be he conscious or not. In moments so much had been taken from him. Word had come that the daimyo ordered the end of the cage bird seal. The branch family was going to be free and had the option to form their own clan in restitution to the generations of oppression. Neji should be happy, but he can't stop himself from thinking their freedom was bought with his arm, and he doesn't know if it was worth the price. He's free, but he is also less. He once was a servant, but he was strong, capable. More than capable, prodigious. His potential limitless, so he imagined, but now he's broken. So while his fellow branch members cheer and the main family speak empty words about relocation, Neji trains. He trains and trains and trains. And she watches. He can feel her eyes on him. Every moment, every twitch. Nothing escapes her gaze, her eyes sharper than most give her credit for. He hates her eyes, eyes that presume to watch him in such close detail. Picking apart his every flaw, laying him completely bare to her judgment. How dare someone weak possess such eyes? Eyes that look through him when he informed her of her fate. Eyes that deem him lesser. Eyes of the entitled, of the blessed, the chosen that can't bear the burden of luxury. Minimal expectation and she falters, always seeking to break from tradition when tradition keeps the Hyuga strong. She's a failure, and he hates her. He'd have his father if not for her. His father would be free if not for her. She takes and takes and takes from him. Her lack of talent is great as his genius, the two in inverse. Both cannot rise, what harms one benefits the other. She was strengthened by his injury. Was the Uzumaki her agent? Sent to avenge her loss because she was too weak to do it herself? It must be, why else would he be so brutal to a complete stranger? She set this in motion. She watches him now to see her master work, to see the fruits of her labor, his struggle. That bitch. Stop watching me. His breathing has become even more ragged. He can't take it anymore. Even injured you are still quiet, the genius, Ni-san, she said evenly. What does that mean? Are you mocking me? Why would I mock you? We are family. The end of the seal does not make us family. You and I can never be family. So enjoy your momentary victory because it won't last. I take no pleasure in your disability. Watching you struggle holds no entertainment for me. I'm not what you say I am. You are. It was decided by fate. Then fate was always going to take your arm, and if I found it amusing, that too would be fate. You should have no feelings on the matter, correct? It is all predestined. Neji does not speak. He cannot craft a retort, and Hinata takes that as her cue to leave. She did not lie. Seeing Neji hurt held no pleasure for her. What pleasure could you take of watching someone live on in injury when you sincerely wished them dead? Her plans were coming together much faster than she'd ever anticipated. She knew with the information she had the Akatsuki, the old fool, would feel the need to be proactive. He hadn't lost all of his instincts, but she assumed he'd be too soft to lead the charge, that he'd delay for a year or two and let his replacement handle it. But this is almost better. He'd have to sit in that chair and live with the disgrace, as many of his top Junin wonder if he's going to war to cling to power, the man of peace himself being considered a warmonger. It was delicious, but still didn't bring her the fraction of satisfaction that him assigning Naruto to her did. She assumed she'd get him in the period before Jiraiya went to prepare for a training trip, the same as he did for Minato. But no, he's hers outright. Sarutobi claims it's only for the 6 months leading to the invasion, but that'd be plenty of time to get him ready. She just couldn't wait. Jiraiya's expression when the old monkey made his decision was just icing on an incredibly sweet cake. He could only glare, the one sign of his impotent rage. She would get Naruto ready and with the might of Konoha, vanquish all of their enemies. Then the old monkey can go wither away in irrelevance while she and Naruto-kun continue to break barriers. She couldn't wait. She was heading down the final path to her compound, to see her former apprentice waiting for her. You seem happy. Whose soul did you eat today, sensei? Oh, Anko-chan. You smell of disappointment and sake. Well, you always smell of disappointment. Fuck you, bitch. You were never really my type. So I've heard. Is it the red hair or the prepubescent? Such a crass little trollop you turned out to be. And I'd request you not speak of my new apprentice that way. God, the old man has really given up, hasn't he? To allow you to be the master of anyone is criminal but him. I don't know if I should try to kill you to save him or kill him to save the rest of us. Anko spoke and immediately found a firm hand around her throat and was lifted off the ground. Poor little Anko. She never did know when to shut up. I should really snap your neck right here, but that's what you want. One final act to show sensei cares. Be honest, you were never mad I left, you were mad I left you. How could I? You want to know why? Why I gave you the curse mark and left you in that lab? Because the depths to which you disappointed are hard to articulate. I thought you were someone like me, but you weren't. That seal was to maximize your potential, no more and no less. I wanted a student that would accomplish something new, change the shinobi world. You just wanted to please me like some concubine. Orochimaru said, her grasp tightening. And now you threaten Naruto-kun because I see his value. having nurtured it in a far less direct way than I did with you, and yet look at him, at how much he's accomplished because he was willing to do so. Orochimaru finally let Anko go, dropping her to the ground. Anko immediately began to rub her throat, trying to ease the pain. People think I want another me. I want someone in my image who thinks like me. Why would I want that? I'm not that egotistical. I don't need a replacement or an heir to some imagined throne. Unlike most of you unremarkables, I don't want to change Naruto in the slightest. I want him to be the best version of himself, even if that version is my antithesis. Yay, right, no one would believe that. Orochimaru smiled. That's what she was counting on. He would and he will. He isn't beholden to groupthink and is willing to find things out for himself. But I'll tell you, like I told Sarutobi and Jiraiya, Anko, if you interfere with my apprentice or try to influence him in a way I don't like, it won't be healthy for you. And if that's too cryptic, I'll be literal. I'll kill you, Anko. Do we have an understanding? Seeing her former student isn't responding, Orochimaru grabs her hair and pulls her head back. Do we have an understanding, Anko? Hi, good girl. Now, run along, and the next time we speak try to be a bit more polite. You're a kunoichi, not a corner girl. He stares at his charge, not knowing what to say. His words fall on deaf ears, and he really isn't one to give speeches. It's never been his thing. He's the cool, aloof, genius and really cool type. You're supposed to hang off his every word. But this boy, he's immune to the coolness. It was vexing. It was annoying, but before now, it hadn't been dangerous. Sasuke couldn't know Naruto's hard and fast rule or why the boy had it, but he needs to learn his emotional outbursts can get him hurt. If that had been another senior ninja, they may have just snapped his wrist and been done with it, but he'd really rather gamble with the health of his student. So now the boy is tied up with ninja wire, looking at Kakashi with all the hate his little body can muster, but at least he has enough sense not to activate his Sharingan, or Kakashi might have had to pop him one. I know you hate Itachi. I know why. No one can fault you for wanting him dead, for it to be a driving motivator in your life. But these childish temper tantrums, that needs to end, Sasuke. You almost got skewered today because you violated the personal space of the wrong shinobi, and had I not been there, your revenge would be moot. How was I to know he'd react like that? We're trained killers. He was just ambushed by 2S rank ninja. If you knew nothing else, you should assume he'd be a little worked up, having survived what should have been certain death or defeat. Also, he had a concussion, so your shaking and yelling wasn't helping matters. That's just baseline observations even a genin should have been able to make. The boy hung his head in shame. Finally, something got through to him. I just needed to know why Itachi thought he was worth it. What made him so special? If you knew, then what? What would knowing solve? Shouldn't you just be relieved he is in custody and no one else died to make it happen? I heard he managed to stab him in the back. No genin nor chunin should be able to do that. Why? He's not invulnerable and he's not a god. And as Naruto mentioned, he was with the Sannin. All of them. Do you think none of them would be able to make Itachi leave a small opening in his defense? He likely wasn't concerned about Naruto at that point, and that was his mistake. That's the thing about this profession, Sasuke. It only takes one time to fall into the right trap or fall for the right trick, and powerful or not, you die. Is he well enough to talk? Yes, but don't push it. He was lucky Naruto was concussed, or the Nuibari would have pierced his heart and killed him instantly. I don't exactly feel lucky, Tsunade-sama. Itachi quipped, small smile on his face. Shut it, brat. You missed your last checkup. Being a missing nin doesn't allow for one to keep a consistent schedule, especially with the Akatsuki starting their initial play. What can you tell me about that, Itachi-kun? The Sandaime spoke. Leader Sama wanted to test the youngest Jinchuriki, assess their threat level, since we wouldn't be going after them for a few years. Why the delay? The Mizukage died, Sandaime-sama. The Sanbi won't reform for at least 3 years. How long do you think it'd take them to replace you and Kisame? I'm not sure. S-rank nuke nin aren't common, and they really need to be of that caliber. Maybe a year and a half. Itachi postulated. Good, good. Itachi, you return now in a time of upheaval. Some of my past indiscretions have come to light, so I am not long for the chair, but I won't leave the Akatsuki to my replacement. I must once call on your service once again. I believe Maelstrom will need you now more than ever. What do you mean? Asked Itachi. Even Tsunade was confused at what new danger Naruto found himself subjected to. Orochimaru has returned. She gained the daimyo to make it so and has been 5 steps ahead of me. She wants Naruto. I don't know why, but currently she is the one best suited to raise his skill level quickly. I know my student. She will demand he be subjected to a period of isolation, just her and whoever she may choose to aid in his development. As his master, she has that right. But as a clan heir, one that faced a recent abduction attempt, I think he'll need additional security, and as Hokage that is my right. It'll be an observe and report assignment just like last time. I accept, Hokage-sama. What about Sasuke? I believe you should have the right to decide. Inform him of the truth and I'll do what I can to mend your broken bond. If you wish he stay ignorant, I can claim you are in a secure facility or even succumb to your injuries. No one would be too credulous at the idea you fell to the Sannin. When would I need to start my watch over Naruto-kun? You'll be on bed rest for at least 5 more days, no debate. Tsunade stated, brooking no argument. Then you'll have your answer no later than that, Sandaime-sama. Accepting his response, the Sandaime and Tsunade leave Itachi's room and head for an exit. When this aim issue is resolved, I want you to replace me. Snort. I bet you do, but I vehemently decline. Tsunade, please. The village will need strong leadership. Then let Jiraiya do it. It's about time he stopped playing spy anyway. Hell, he'd take the position to spite Orochimaru. That's part of the problem. He'd go out of his way to antagonize her. That would end in disaster, a disaster with Naruto in the middle of it. And with Naruto involved, that is involved as well. So, what, you think'll keep Jiraiya and Orochimaru from killing each other and make sure your Jinchuriki is stable? No, I want nothing to do with this. Also, why would Naruto be in the middle? He doesn't seem aware Jiraiya is his godfather. At this point, Jiraiya is just his father's sensei that half-assed his Chunin finals training. She has something planned for Naruto and Jiraiya won't sit idly by and allow it to happen. And I will. No, you won't needlessly antagonize her, and since you're his Obaken, if you warn him he'll believe you. No, he'll take it under consideration and look for proof. Likely because he's had to learn to rely on himself from an early age. Funny how that works. I can't have that fight again, Tsunade. You're the best choice. And maybe with you in the chair this village can get back something it's lost under my leadership. You may even inspire Naruto to want to be Hokage again. Sarutobi said, causing Tsunade to glare at him. That's more reason not to take the hat. If he gave up on that idiotic dream, then all the better, he'll live longer. Maybe have a family and find some happiness. Tsunade, just consider it. Until then, you have your medical training program. Get as many medics trained up as you can and start back seriously training yourself. PFF'd, take your own advice, old man. You'll get your damn medics, 3 decades late. As far as that other thing, don't bank on me accepting. It's enough I'm here and having to deal with this bullshit again. The next day found Team Kurenai in the Sandaime's office. The ceremony was brief and all were informed that Shikamaru and Shino would become Chunin, making Team Kurenai the first team to promote to Chunin during their first exam since the Sannin. Both boys accepted the vests and new promotion. Both Kurenai and Naruto were happy that the entire team was allowed to succeed together. Hiruzen gave them their moment of merriment before he continued. While this is good news, this also signifies a change. While you are allowed to stay together as a team and I'd suggest you do, Naruto will officially be entering into an apprenticeship. Hiruzen said and saw the surprise on all of their faces. I'm sure Naruto informed you of who attacked him, yes. Seeing them all nod, he continues, We have received a great deal of information about this organization and where they are located. This is an A-class secret. I'm only telling you because of your connection to Naruto. In 6 months' time we will be invading AIM with the intention of ending the Akatsuki threat. That is why Naruto will be entering into an apprenticeship. Hokage-sama, if he is a target, shouldn't he be left out of the invasion? Kurenai asked, clearly worried about her student. If Naruto were some low-level chunin, yes. But he isn't, and his combat prowess will be needed. As he is now, I'd allow him to go, but after our ramp up I'm more than confident he'll be prepared. I've already spoken with your fathers and they have agreed to increase your training as well. You will still take missions, but they'll be primarily combat-oriented, so you have field experience to go with your new skills. This won't be easy, nor will it be pleasant, but striking the Akatsuki down while we have the element of surprise is the best choice available. Seeing the boys nod in understanding, he continued. Naruto, your training with Orochimaru begins in a week. She's requested you not take missions and solely focus on her training during that time. She'll collect you from your apartment on the day you start. You will have your nights free, so don't lose connection with your team. If you have no questions, you are all dismissed. The team departed, the newly promoted Chunin heading off to their training grounds, but Kurenai had somewhere else to go. She could no longer ignore Anko's words as paranoia. She knew Naruto and the Sandaime had a strained relationship, but she assumed if Orochimaru did intend him harm, the Hokage could protect him. But he assigned her student to the Viper herself. Even as a Junin, there are things she is not aware of and things the Hokage clearly had no intention of telling her. That only made her concern grow more. It didn't help she'd briefly ran into the Sannin while visiting Naruto. Kurenai was a Junin, a new Junin, but one all the same, and even she was slightly cowed by the passive presence of Orochimaru. The woman exuded supreme confidence, as if she always had things in hand and you were always just a toy for her to play with. It was unnerving, and Naruto was going to be subjected to that for at least 6 months. If she could barely stand to be near an alleged ally, how would she be able to protect Naruto from the people targeting him? As she currently was, she couldn't. She needed to better herself, just as her students would be doing. She needed to expand her skill set, shore up any weaknesses, and get creative with what she was good at. She had a lot of work to do, but knew there was a generalist, someone who was quite good at everything without being outwardly fantastic at any one thing in particular. She arrived at her destination promptly, knocking on the door more frantically than she intended. Soon, the door was opened and she was greeted by the resident. Asuma, I need your help. He walks with a confident stride and stern visage. It doesn't not reflect his true feelings, but as a Hyuga it is what is expected of him. Expectations, perceptions matter. He wishes his eldest daughter would understand that. He wishes a lot about her, mostly that she didn't hate him and her clan. He can see it. Anyone who would bother to pay attention to Hinata could, but most do not take the time. He does. He knows this is his fault. The coldness and lack of affection he subjected her to soon after her mother passed and she was almost kidnapped, it didn't break her, but she grew quiet and distant. She tolerates him, Hanabi and everyone else, and if it didn't end up with a cage bird seal she'd likely just leave the clan to be free of them. Yes, the Byakugan sees all and he sees her desire to be rid of them. Her clan is little more than weights she cannot cast off. He does not know how to reach her. Her eyes burn with absolute hatred for him, and any attempt to mend what is broken between them is rebuffed. He was weak, a weak man that hid behind tradition and a facade to mask his overwhelming grief. He should have ended the separation between branches. He could have freed his brother, but he wanted to be a perfect leader of the Hyuga, to do what is expected of him. To appear strong but to bow before the forces of habit. It was a paradox. In many ways, Hinata is stronger than him. She actively bristles against tradition and chooses to fight it regardless of her detractors. He should have encouraged it more instead of favoring Hanabi, but it was easier with Hanabi. Hanabi's eyes didn't look through him, deeming him unworthy. They didn't silently ask why he was alive when clearly the superior parent and brother both died, leaving this empty shell of a man. Just like he saw Hinata, Hinata saw him and wordlessly let him know she found him wanting at best, his continued existence offensive at worst. She was lost to him as she had no desire to reconcile and no amount of apologizing, which he's never done, could fix it. He'd convinced himself of that so this doctrine of tolerance would continue. A permafrost between parent and child and all because he'd rather look strong than be strong. But it wasn't his daughter that brought him here but his nephew, the one person he may have wronged even more than Hinata. The boy had lost himself since the Chunin finals, not even removing the seal that damned him has been enough to lift his spirits. When he thought himself a slave and had little, Neji had his talent and the regard it earned him. But now, he believes it is all gone and has begun to spin tales of Hinata setting this up. She doesn't deny it, only throwing his belief of fate in his face. He can answer back but it only increases his rage and depression. An invasion is coming. The Sandaime informed all Junin of this and told them they need to be increasing their training and the training of anyone under their command. Hiyashi believed if Neji could participate in this invasion, if he could distinguish himself he'd earn back what he'd lost. But he'd need to fix his arm to do so. He could go to Suna but previous experience has shown their prosthetics and the gentle fist don't mix. Instead he opted to come here, to make a deal with the devil herself. He was surprised when he arrived at the manor to be greeted by the Uzumaki. The boy managed to use the proper honorific when greeting him but Hiyashi could tell it felt like ash in his mouth. While nothing but potential now, they boy would be powerful one day and that may be a relationship he needs to repair. Just another example of when being a joyless hardass has done more harm than good. The Uzumaki escorted Hiyashi to an office and excused himself. Orochimaru arrived moments later, looking incredibly pleased with herself. "What can I do for you today, Hiyashi?" "My nephew, he needs a replacement for his missing arm and I'm hoping you can help." "Kukuku, I'm sure I can help Neji-kun with his little problem." "And what will it cost me?" "Money is no object. Money I have, besides why wouldn't help such a promising shinobi? He is a comrade, after all." No money need be exchanged, however, your gratitude would be invaluable. And if I were to be asked to act on this gratitude in the future then it would only be fair. Hiyashi asked but knew he'd walked into her trap. Her pocket was not where he wanted to be, not where his clan needed to be but he would do so for his nephew and handle the consequences later. "So, we have an accord?" she asked, smile never leaving her face. "We do. Good. I will meet him at the hospital in a week's time. I should have something by then but have his measurements sent to me as soon as possible." "It will be done. Thank you for your time and your efforts." "Of course, I love to help." Naruto stood on the private training grounds panting. He was surrounded by upturned earth, some of it scorched, others with deep grooves carved into it and more still soaking wet. He'd just completed his assessment, demonstrating his skills in nin, gen, and taijutsu and he'd shown most of what he could do. She shrugged it all off as if it were laughably easy. It isn't that he thinks he's on the level of a Sannin but still would like to make his opponent put forth a little effort and not just smile at him as if he were a baby taking his first steps. But as it were, he was tapped out. He'd essentially shown her everything, though there were a few surprises tucked away. Naruto could feel exhaustion oncoming. He probably should already have passed out but bullheaded determination had managed to stave it off. He couldn't tell how she felt about his demonstration, keeping the same neutral expression the entire time and at this point he couldn't care, he needed a nap. Naruto hit the ground with a thud, causing Orochimaru to laugh. She was quite happy with his display but annoyed as well. Had he been given proper directly when he graduated and allowed to promote when he earned it he'd likely be further ahead and with more experience. If nothing else, it is experience he needs as much of what he knows, hadn't become instinctive yet so his transitions to some tactics aren't seamless but she had 6 months to work out the kinks and expand on his skill set. She saw why he favored his sword. His stature made engaging in taijutsu with anyone older, and therefore larger than him, a chore. His skills were certainly befitting his rank, and she could tell he dedicated the time to keeping them polished, but he wouldn't see a true leap until his body started to mature. She created a clone and had it take Naruto to his room and then called out Naruto's new shadow. Sarutobi-sensei clearly thought he was clever, his little gambit, but he needed to be reminded why she was so ahead of him and how any piece he puts into play can be turned or neutralized. "Itachi-kun, aren't you going to come out and say hello?" she said, after said shadow refused to reveal himself. "So very rude. I'm sure you've heard about Danzo. Such a pathetic end to a once proud shinobi. I am curious, after he ordered you to kill your family, why didn't you ever kill him?" Itachi immediately appeared before her. "I suggest you drop this topic," he said in his usual monotone. "Or what, will you attack me? Chance revealing you're still alive. Poor Sasuke-kun, no family, no revenge, he's so very lost. He may need guidance. You will stay away from Sasuke. I may and I may not, and there isn't a lot you can do about it." "Kukuku, but back to my question, why didn't you kill Danzo?" "If someone made me decide between two things I cherished, I may make the decision, but I would certainly kill the person who made me do so." "Did you even consider it?" she asked and saw no response. He was disciplined, but still, she had a feeling she was having an effect. "Or are you unable to act without orders? Another genius that can only follow the path laid before them, and what is the result? Your brother, broken and alone with no bonds to speak of, while you play guard to someone who doesn't need it because another paranoid old man has made demands of you. Kukuku, so tragic, Itachi-kun." She said nothing else as she entered her manor, leaving Itachi with his thoughts. As much as he'd want to deny it, the Sannin had a point. Danzo was a threat. He should have removed him to ensure Sasuke would be safe from his schemes and for stopping Shisui from finding an alternate resolution, but he hadn't. He only followed orders, and while the village avoided a civil war, his brother bore the brunt of his choices. It was hard to accept, but it was the truth. Without getting justice with his own hands, Sasuke would find it difficult to move on, and that was Itachi's fault, no one else's. "You know, I enjoy spending time with you. I really do. As you should. I'm good company and a beautiful woman. I'm 12, but let's go with that. My point is that since I enjoy spending time with you, Shizune and Taunton, you don't have to carry me. I'm not going to flee," said Naruto was currently underarm of Tsunade. It was embarrassing. He's a chunin, for crying out loud. After he awoke from his nap, he showered and changed into some civilian clothing, fully prepared to finish his treatise on the battle applications and limitations on the Shunshin no Jutsu. He called it, the battle applications and limitations on the Shunshin no Jutsu. Until Tsunade stormed and once again abducted him. Shisho just watched and waved, smiling the entire time. He'd pout if it didn't add to Tsunade's amusement and his shame. "But you need to have an older familial figure embarrass you, it's a rite of passage." "Oh joy, shush. It isn't that bad. The only reason people aren't laughing at me is they think you'll punch them into the sky. And I will, so you have nothing to complain about. Besides, we're here." Here was a small bar. Apparently he was going to drink his dinner once more. The two settled in, joined by Shizune shortly after their arrival, and chatted away between drinks. Naruto could tell something was bothering Tsunade but didn't want to bring down the mood. After a few bottles, she got a faraway look in her eyes and asked Naruto something he had not been expecting. "Brat, why don't you want to be Hokage anymore? Isn't it against your nindo to give up?" Naruto paused for a moment, truly surprised by the question. Like so many things in his life, when he'd let go of his dream, he just busied himself with training and his work, but he can still clearly remember the day he stopped believing it were possible. "I didn't stop wanting it, I just no longer believed it to be an achievable dream." "Why?" asked Shizune. He looked sad, so it was something he didn't enjoy talking about it, but it's better to get these things off your chest. "When you guys treated me, After I returned and gave my debrief, the old man, of course, denied me my promotion. But he had this look in his eyes, pleading with me to understand him, to sympathize with him. He held all the power, but he acted as if he were the victim of these large forces outside of his control. I hated him in that moment, sincerely I hated him in his entirety. Before that meeting, I still had some trust and held a sliver of affection for the old man, if for no other reason than old-time sake. But he killed it. All the times he told me I'd earn acknowledgement if I just worked hard enough and showed the village my worth. He had no intention of allowing me to do that, and if he would hold me back, what hope did I have of convincing the rest of these small-minded assholes? But that Chunin that was with you after Ishval, he came around. Shizune pointed out. True, but Nichan, there are thousands of shinobi in Konoha. How could I ever possibly work with enough of them to change the opinion of me en masse? The numbers simply didn't work out, and besides some catastrophic event or a war, which I'd never wish for, I didn't see another path with the Hokage actively working against me. So, I dedicated myself to improving my skills as a shinobi, inside and outside of combat. I had no name, you know. For what I knew, I didn't come from a clan, so it's not like I had some prized lineage. Naruto stopped to chuckle at that. All I had was the willingness to outwork everyone, but when you're shown hard work, doesn't matter what's left. Become some fiend like Danzo. Always plotting and scheming in the dark. That's not me. Instead, I decided I'd be the strongest ninja in the village. One no one could ignore. Even if I never was named Hokage, I'd make the sitting Hokage look like an Alsoran in comparison. Tsunade laughed. It sounded like something Kushina would say, and it was good to have a reminder that while often serious, his spirit hadn't been broken. Why did you ask? Sensei told me you used to want to be Hokage. I was just curious. You know, I've lost a lot of people to that dream. So many I came to despise the position. Irrational. Probably, but I just did. A selfish part of me was relieved when he said you'd given up. I wouldn't have to lose you as well, but if being Hokage is what you truly want, you shouldn't let Sensei be the reason you no longer believe it possible. He won't be Hokage forever, and of all the people he's considered, none would intentionally hold you back. I guess. I just haven't thought about it in a while. Think about it, or don't. Ultimately, it's up to you, but don't let that old bastard be the reason you don't try. Don't give him that power. I'll consider it. The mood lightened after that, and the trio continued to enjoy the night. Unbeknownst to them, Jiraiya had returned to the village. When Sarutobi Sense informed him Naruto would be apprenticed under Orochimaru, he was furious at Hiruzen giving Naruto to Orochimaru for any period of time. He left to collect himself but returned, hoping he could convince his sensei this was a terrible idea. Hiruzen tried to get Jiraiya to accept this, as it was the best option for the time being. No argument could appease the Sannin, as he feared what her influence would do to his godson. Jiraiya stormed out of Hiruzen's office in desperate need of a drink. He just so happened to pick the same establishment our trio were occupying. He immediately approached them, happy at the chance to spend time with Tsunade and Naruto, and it was in that order. "Hey, what are you three doing here?" he asked. "We were enjoying ourselves. What are you doing here?" "I just left Sensei's and decided I could use a nightcap." "Naruto, I need to warn you. Don't bother. The Sandame already has. Everyone treats her like she's going to eat their children. Maybe she's earned that, maybe not, but she's been good to me, minus the stabbing." He said the last part quietly. "You don't know her like I do. We were on a team together for years. You need to listen to me, Naruto. I only have your best interests in mind. That's cool or whatever, but I'll be fine. I prefer to judge people for myself, and if something feels wrong, I'll handle it." "You can't handle it. This isn't some second-rate Kiri swordsman, Naruto. Orochimaru has been at this longer than you've been alive. She could have plans within plots and you'd never know until it was too late. She's twisted, she always has been. Just come on the road with me. I trained your father, I certainly can train you." He ignored Tsunade's scoff and waited for Naruto's reply. I don't fight like my father, from what little I know, I'm nothing like him. I just don't think you're the best sensei for me. It really isn't anything personal. Not personal. You'd rather be taught by that sick monster than your own godfather, and it's not personal. You're my godfather, Naruto said in genuine surprise and was wondering why his mom hadn't said anything. Yes, and I'm sorry I hadn't been there for you. I won't make excuses, but give me a chance to make this right. We can go on the road and I can show you more than the snake ever could. Jiraiya said, his old feelings of jealousy flaring up. The old man isn't pulling me off my team, I can't continue to take missions with them if I left, and he said it's important I do that. We can take missions, Naruto. But I wouldn't be with my team. I need to stay in sync with my team, so I have to stay here. Also, the old man already decided and I agreed to it. I don't go back on my word. This time you do. You have no idea the amount of danger you are in, and I can't fathom why Sarutobi-sensei is allowing this. Granted, he was always too soft on his favorite student, literally letting her get away with murder, but this is too far. Just pack your things, we'll leave in the morning. He already said he isn't leaving, Jiraiya. And that's stupid. I'm not going to let him be used by her. You two seem to forget what she's really like. A heartless traitor that cares for no one because she can't. She's a high-functioning sociopath and the evilest bitch to ever grace the elemental nations. Tsunade didn't know why Jiraiya's words were having an effect on her. She's listened to this insipid rant enough to just ignore it, but this time she can't. He needs to be made aware of some things and maybe he'll finally shut up. Naruto, you mind if I tell you a story? It isn't long. We don't have time for this, Tsunade. You intruded on us, Jiraiya, and I didn't ask you, now shut up, she said with an edge to her voice that didn't go unnoticed. Sure, Naruto answered. There once was a little girl. She lost her parents early in life and it left a lasting scar. She also didn't think like everyone else. Morality and social norms around deviance didn't make sense to her. But she was also a genius. So much in fact she attracted the attention of the Hokage to be on his genin cell along with the princess of the village and the town jester. Now, the Hokage was considered a great and powerful man who was also incredibly wise. He came to believe in his own wisdom as well, so when he started favoring the genius with more of his attention than the other teammates, he was able to justify it to himself, but it was simply that her skills and interests most mirrored his own. The village princess recognized how unfair this was, but, at that time, still had family that could supplement her training. The town jester, however, became angry and resentful. He didn't want to be known as a fool any longer and hated being in the shadow of the genius and the princess. However, as is often the case, when little boys become angry at powerful men, the boys lash out at weaker targets instead of challenging the powerful man. The jester started to mock the looks of the genius. Anytime he felt insecure, he'd levy an insult. What the jester hadn't known was not only was the genius sensitive about her looks, but she had a bit of a crush on the jester and wanted him to do well. But after his continued insults, she grew to despise the jester and mocked him in kind. The jester would always see himself as the true injured party, and the genius's later actions would only solidify that in his mind. Jiraiya's face was frozen in shock at Tsunade's stories, a part of him wishing it wasn't remotely true. Oh, but there is more to this tale. The team was poison. The genius hated the jester hated the genius, and both craved the acknowledgement of the wise and powerful old man. The team would manage to stay together, fight many battles and even a war. They were young then, barely in their 20s, when they received the titles that would cement them as the most legendary team of ninja to ever exist. The wise and powerful old man was proud of his students and their growth, each having prodigious skills in various shinobi arts, but he took notice of the genius most of all. She had matured into an exotic beauty, and with how much she respected and admired the wise and power old man, he found himself desiring her in the way a power man often desires a woman. They began an affair, one where the wise and powerful old man would pull her toward him and push her away. Eventually, the wise and powerful old man decided he needed to end the affair. The fact he was informed she was with his child can be chalked up to mere coincidence for the gullible among us. The man, fearing what people would say, requested the genius rid herself of the child, pleaded really as he didn't want to lose his real family. Hurt, though she'd never show it, the genius went to the princess to do just that. 3 months later she was now under the charge of a sick, twisted and bitter cripple. It wouldn't be long before the princess left, having lost the last of her clan. Without her support and with the hatred she felt for the wise and powerful old man that threw her away, the genius indulged fully in her alternative thinking. She no longer felt the need to hold back. Nothing was wrong, everything was permitted, and the sick, twisted and bitter cripple loved and encouraged her fall into madness. The end. Tsunade, Shizune and Naruto exited the bar after her story. Jiraiya hadn't moved but looked utterly shocked by what Tsunade shared. As the three were making their way back to Orochimaru's, Naruto was curious about something. "So, were you and Orochimaru friends?" "I think I'm as close to that as she'd allow anyone to be, but it isn't a straightforward relationship and how she shows she cares is a little unorthodox," Tsunade said. "What do you mean?" "When I initially left the village with Shizune, I was a mess. Depressed and quickly succumbing to alcoholism and a gambling addiction. Whether I wanted to be completely numb or just hurt myself through debasement I don't know, but I was hardly functional and Shizune was taking care of me more than I was truly training her. That lasted for about a year before Orochimaru found me." Tsunade stopped to laugh. She was not happy with what she saw. She said there are very few people she deems remarkable and I was one of those, but if I was going to lose myself in grief it'd be better to just join those I lost. She said she'd give me 3 months to make a decision and if I were still some stumbling drunk she'd kill me, and even as drunk as I was I knew she meant it. "So, what happened?" "She found me 3 months later and we fought." "Well, sparred for us. You destroyed a forest with your antics," Shizune interrupted. "Hey, I appreciate she cared but no one threatens me, so we had a bit of a tussle. Last good fight I've had, honestly." "No, Tsunade-sama. You two are reckless and will just cause destruction. But it'll be fun. Oh, and that reminds me, Brat, you got to find someone around your level you like fighting. Not necessarily a rival, as those relationships tend to turn bitter. Don't know too many people who could fit the bill, and the ones I could think of don't much care for me." "Who were you thinking of, Naruto-kun?" "Neji Hyuga, Rock Lee and Sasuke Uchiha." "Oh, yay. People take maiming, attempted murders and losing their lifetime goals personally," Shizune offered, helpfully but slurred. "They do?" Naruto jokingly asked. Shizune nodded before confirming, "They do. And it doesn't even matter why." The blonde and the redhead both snickered at Shizune's earnestness. While engaging in light banter as he returned to Orochimaru's, Naruto thought about Tsunade's words. True, as far as taijutsu, Neji, Rock Lee and Sasuke could push him. Chances are they had skills superior to his own, or in Sasuke's case having it buttressed with the predictive abilities of his Sharingan. Neither Shikamaru nor Shino were heavy combat types. They could certainly handle themselves, but it was just a different approach as they favored being several steps ahead of their opponents, leading them into traps within traps. Naruto could plan a few steps ahead, especially when previous experience came into play, but he wasn't the strategists his teammates were. It's what made sparring with them so fun. He had to be unpredictable and improvise in ways that would blow up their plans. Naruto was lost in his thoughts and not fully aware he'd made it to his final destination until he heard Tsunade knock on the door. The trio were ushered in by Kabuto, who led them to Orochimaru's first story office. The manor appeared to be 2 stories but had 2 sublevels as well. When they arrived, there were 3 other people in the room with her, a tall boy in his late teens with white hair and 2 red dots over his eyebrows. 2 teenage females, one in her mid-teens with pinkish red hair and the other 12 to 13 with red hair and eyes to match, a shade similar to Naruto's. "So, This shithead is the R-clan head. I don't see it, said the older girl. What? Was Naruto's response. After Tsunade forced Naruto to sober up with the help of medical ninjutsu, the heir of the Uzumaki was better able to engage with his new clansmen. Tayuya was foul-mouthed, so he quickly learned not to take anything personally. She was only respectful to Orochimaru. But she was also funny, direct and honest, which were all things Naruto could appreciate. Karen was interesting. She was, for the most part, pretty quiet and amiable until something set her off, then she'd explode. Tayuya enjoyed setting her off. As the three Uzumaki chatted through the night, Naruto learned that Tayuya was a genjutsu specialist but also had some cool summons she could control through her flute. Karen specialized in medical ninjutsu and research. She was originally from Kusa, but her mother and she were not treated well there, and she was eventually saved by Orochimaru. Naruto tried to include the older boy, Kimimaro he learned his name was, but he was terse and didn't seem interested, so Naruto let him be. All in all, it was an interesting evening getting to know his fellow clan members, even at the cost of a full night's rest. While the Uzumaki had been getting to know each other, Tsunade informed Orochimaru she'd told Naruto about Team Hiruzen's history, including her past with the Sandaime. She relayed how Jiraiya looked beyond shocked, as if he couldn't process the information given. Orochimaru didn't really care that Tsunade blabbed about something that, for almost anyone else, would be considered a highly personal piece of information. Not only did it make Hiruzen and Jiraiya look bad in the eyes of Naruto, but it may cause a rift between the Toad Sage and the old man. Besides, Tsunade was defending her. The two have had the debate long enough for her to know Tsunade's position on the issue. Tsunade can't, or refuses to believe, she would have made the same choices if not for the fallout of their team. Orochimaru doesn't feel guilty about, well, anything really, but she doesn't like that Tsunade accepts blame for her choices. She did what she did because she wanted to do it. She's not some damaged, little girl that Hiruzen broke. She'll never accept that. Also, she just doesn't want to be one more thing Tsunade blames herself for. The woman is so guilt-ridden, it's amazing she manages to get out of bed. It's unhealthy and limiting. The two have never and will never see eye to eye on this issue. Outside of their ethics on human experimentation, it is really the only thing they vehemently disagree on. Well, in Tsunade's Houri, there are pleasant ways to start a day. Hiruzen is sure of this. Granted, he hasn't had what he'd consider a pleasant start to any day in years. It's always something, always. It'd be bad enough if the letter he received from Rasa was the whole of it, because clearly his counterpart is a sadistic asshole upstart in need of a beating. Rasa finally sent word on if he'd provide aid in the upcoming AIM invasion, and he would, under some conditions. Hiruzen realized the man would try to get something out of this. The fact that it was to their mutual benefit wouldn't be enough prompting to act. But why this? Rasa wants to see the fight that should have been the finals of the Chunin exams, Gaara vs. Naruto, Jinchuriki vs. Jinchuriki. He also wants this exercise as pointless measuring to take place in Suna, as to give his boy as much of an advantage as he could. Hiruzen could have safeguards on hand, making sure Jiraiya was there with seals in hand to subdue either of them. However, they are Jinchuriki and things can escalate. There is a real risk of serious, permanent injury occurring, and Hiruzen didn't see the value in it. But he'd have to trust Naruto to handle it, as support from Suna reduced the risk for his own shinobi and gave them more manpower. So, yes, that'd have been enough to sour his mood for the day, but he also had the displeasure of sitting across from a clearly hungover Jiraiya looking both depressed, angry and confused. It was bad enough he stumbled in, making Hiruzen's Anbu tense, but the large man just sat down and hadn't said a word. Hiruzen, being used to his students' quirks, knew this happens when Jiraiya is building up to have a conversation he'd much rather avoid. He was trying to find his nerve, and if he held to pattern, the first thing he said would be crass and inappropriate. So, sensei, impregnate any students lately? And there it was. Hiruzen immediately signaled for his Anbu to leave, refusing to do this in front of an audience. He trusted them, but even that had its limits. No, not lately, Jiraiya. The old boy doesn't get around like he used to. But you did get around. So very smooth, the professor was. Jiraiya, I'm going to need you to get to the point, as I have actual work and something of actual importance we need to discuss. You toyed with your student and then sent her to your lunatic of a rival. I think that's important. Not to you, it isn't. Every one of her accomplishments was taken as a personal slight by you, Jiraiya. Blame me if you must, in my alleged favoritism, but you burned the bridge between you two, so you'll forgive me if I find this to be a bit hypocritical, especially from a super pervert. Alleged favoritism, even now you deny it. No, I'm just tired of having to confront it. I'm not perfect, far from it. I've been a professional killer longer than you've been alive. I mess up. I think too highly of myself. I'm flawed, Jiraiya. So, yes, when I had someone that looked upon me with admiration and desire, I savored it. I indulged in it because it was new and simpler. Bawako and I were having problems. The demands of being Hokage leaves little time to be a quality husband and father, but the excuse had worn thin. She wanted more time, the children did as well. Orochimaru just wanted me. Until you had your fill and threw her away. Yes, I didn't know Danzo was as twisted as he'd become, but for the sake of my marriage and to manage my own guilt I needed some distance, so I reassigned her in limited contact. And before you go on, yes, I've often wondered if how I handled things led her to do what she did. It was one of the reasons I couldn't kill her and let her flee. I often wonder which I regret more. Crossing that line with her, how what I did with Naruto, but I can't go back, only forward. I know, sensei, I'm not sure why I'm here. I guess after Tsunade told me, I've just been thinking about how things could have been different. If I hadn't been so jealous and the like, maybe she would have stayed on the straight and narrow. Maybe, Jiraiya, this is a question I've often had to ask myself as well. So, does this change things for you? No, regardless of the why, what she's done is unconscionable and I want her away from Naruto as soon as possible, but it does add some context. Not enough to excuse her behavior, but I feel I might understand her a little better, he said with a shrug. Now, what's this business you need to tell me? Rasa wants Naruto to fight Gaara, it's his condition to support us against the Akatsuki. I'm not ashamed to admit I wanted to see the fight. Were you disappointed when Naruto forfeited at the Chunin exams? No, it was the right call, but Gaara had the best chance to push Naruto. You weren't exactly forthcoming with his skills, so I know very little of what he can do. He was to be your apprentice, you were supposed to find out. Hiruzen said crossly, which Jiraiya waved off, dismissively. I was under the impression I was to babysit and play bodyguard. If I seriously trained the kid, he'd run through the finals, which he did anyway. I never told you not to seriously train him, the Sandaime shot back. He hadn't. No, you just said you had concerns about his maturity and didn't think he was quite ready to advance, and just so you know, I've been distracted with Orochimaru and the Akatsuki, but we will be having that conversation soon, old man. So you teach him the Rasengan? The Sandaime asked, deciding not to acknowledge the latter statement. I didn't know the kid would get it in a month. Neither Kakashi nor I managed it that fast. That must have stung, Hiruzen said with a smile. Like a bitch and a half. At least his father was an adult before he started showing me up. Jiraiya said, sulking the entire time. Of course, you'll go there with him in case things get out of hand. Of course. The clang of blunted tanto meeting each other rang throughout the private training ground. The smaller combatant was giving it his best, but against a practiced opponent, he was finding himself wanting. The pressure of the assault was unrelenting, suffocating, and forbade any thought. He could only react and react and react, never open to taking the initiative. It was frustrating, infuriating. It was troublesome, Shikamaru said, as he rolled out of the way of the blade aimed at his neck, only to receive a kick to the ribs for his effort. He was in a simple outfit of black shirt and black pants, his Chunin jacket long since discarded. The kick made him realize what a mistake that was. He continued his roll until he got back to his feet, to see his opponent already on him. It was with the barest of margins he was able to block. What the rookie Chunin had not be prepared for was for his attacker's free hand to grab the wrist of the hand holding his tanto and slip into his guard. Before he could make sense of her movements, he was elbowed in the face, causing him to drop his weapon. Next, he felt his arm wrenched behind and above him, causing him to bend over as she kept his arm perfectly straight. He was not given time to dwell on the pain in his shoulder as a fist to the face dropped him to the ground. "Troublesome," he said, rolling to his back. "Getting your kicked generally is, sweetie," Yoshino said. Shikamaru had no response for this. He wanted to complain, but he constantly reminded himself that he asked for this. He recalls how powerless he felt in the Forest of Death, how Naruto did his best to ensure their safety and then willingly marched toward his doom. Shikamaru hated that feeling. His intellect was rendered a non-factor, irrelevant. Nothing he could think of would have helped in the slightest. That was the gap between Orochimaru and them, so he watched as his teammate crossed swords with someone he had no hope of defeating, only to get stabbed in the end. Now, with what is coming, he knows he has to be more than he is. It isn't enough to be able to plan things 20 steps ahead against people that can blow up your strategies with overwhelming power and skill. He could have been forced to watch a teammate die and been no more useful than a blunted kunai. He resolved to never let that be the case again. "You know what your problem is?" Yoshino asked. She was shocked when her son requested she help him train, as she knew his father was handling his development in clan techniques, but she was happy he seemed to be taking things more seriously. Seeing he wasn't going to answer, she continued. "It's taking you too long to get where you need to be. You keep thinking you can warm up in a fight or flip a switch to get serious when you really need to. That might work as a genin, with a junin leading you and a jinchuriki at your back. Not as a chunin, and certainly not in war. You aren't going to get breaks to craft your next plan. You'll have to constantly be moving, fighting, defending while creating your intricate strategies. It's a drag, but you're right. I'll have to think more like that troublesome redhead." "What do you mean?" asked Yoshino. "He's good at coming up with tactics on the fly." "Not surprising. His parents were like that as well." "You knew his parents?" "Yes, but not well. His mother was teased a lot as a kid and kept her social circle small because of it, so not a lot of us could say we knew her well, and his father was extremely kind but also very private." "Who was his father, and does Naruto know?" "I can't tell you, and yes, he does." "Troublesome." At the Aburame compound, Shino was being watched by his father. The two stood in silence, the son continually stabbing his sei into the wood dummy and his father content to watch for flaws in his form. Shino started working on these for the Chunin exam finals, but his match with the puppeteer didn't lend itself to close quarters combat. He, too, lamented his inability to aid Naruto against the once traitor. A hive functions best when all can contribute to the embetterment of the whole, but he was unable to do so. It left him with a feeling of shame. His parents tried to tell him his feelings, while understandable, were illogical. He stood no chance of defeating the once traitor and could have done very little to alter the outcome. He'd acknowledged their words and the validity of their argument, but it did little to quell his emotions. Naruto is strong, the strongest of the three of them. Neither he, nor Shikamaru would challenge that, but their teammate has never lorded it over them. He never discounts their contributions or tries to invoke his seniority in an attempt to diminish them. He has relied on them, their skills and talents, but when he needed them the most they were impotent. Useless is something he'd never felt before and something he wishes to avoid ever feeling again. So, he resolved to better himself, to diversify his skill set while sharpening himself. He would not be the weak link, he would not be a spectator. But progress is a slow process, so for now, he'd simply focus on handling the weapons in his hands with every ounce of precision he could muster. She sometimes forgot when Asuma was properly motivated he was a damn good shinobi, and somehow she'd managed to motivate him. They'd train and spar before he met his team for the day, and she hadn't been pushed like that in some time. She wouldn't say she'd gotten lazy, but she had gotten content, maintaining her skills instead of pushing. Junin were the elite, but even among them there were levels. She needed to be a legitimately elite Junin, her students needed her to be so. Especially Naruto. It was hard being his sensei, not because of what he contained. She wasn't a small-minded fool, but for reasons completely divorced from that. It was difficult to separate how he was on missions, calm, almost detached and focused, with the borderline shy 9-year-old that commissioned her to talk about genjutsu. She remembered how cute he was, his face still retaining his baby fat. He'd become a seasoned shinobi since then, and it'd taken a bit for him to warm up to his team. When he finally did, she realized he was the same good-natured boy, just one that kid behind a facade to those he didn't trust. Her second concern was simply, she wasn't sure how much she truly had to teach him. His chakra control was decent, excellent given his reserves, but not fine enough for genjutsu. She wasn't a ninjutsu type, so had very little to offer someone that could use all 5 nature releases. Stealth, to some extent, but his summons had taken care of a good portion of that. He was ready to be a chunin when she got him and felt a little lost, but they managed to figure it out. Now, however, he was marked. By the Akatsuki and by Orochimaru. Kurenai was honest enough to know she'd be of minimal use against either threat as she was. Asuma understood her concern. He'd been around elite shinobi his entire life and understood feeling inadequate. He'd been helping her perfect his nature releases, fire and earth, along with polishing up her taijutsu and kenjutsu, as she hadn't wielded her kodachi in some time. She was also taking a page from Naruto's book, trying to create more original genjutsu, something people hadn't seen and couldn't just cast off. When it was time to remove the Akatsuki, she promised herself she'd be ready, and if she needed to fight Orochimaru to save her student, she'd be ready for that. He never questioned his mistress, it was not his place. She spoke her will and he carried it out. Theirs was a simple relationship. However, when he first laid eyes on the redhead she was so taken with, he had to admit he was filled with doubts, concerns that said boy was not worth his mistress's attention. As if she knew, she arranged for them to spar, and while he never took opponents lightly, he still held little hope for the boy. Kimimaro could admit when he'd been wrong, and he misjudged this Naruto. The spar started with taijutsu, and the smaller boy quickly learned not to kick someone with the dead bone pulse in the leg, though he recovered quickly. The exchanges were fast, both boys using agility, reaction time and spacing to deflect and slip their blows. Kimimaro initially disregarded the other boy's tactic of kicking him in the calf, instead of the outside of the leg that typical leg kicks targeted. That is, until he started to slow down and wasn't able to put as much pressure on his legs. The boy had been wearing him down, the accumulated damage had taken its toll, but even still, Kimimaro had gotten the better of their fight. Naruto was worse off. A bloody lip is all that remained of the visible damage as his bruises healed swiftly, but he was breathing heavily. Kimimaro admitted to himself that Naruto was a tank, taking hits some of the sound 5 couldn't endure and keep going. A small part of him was having fun, curious what an all-out fight between the two would look like. Orochimaru-sama called a short break before she had them engage with kenjutsu, and Kimimaro saw immediately that the redhead was a much better swordsman as he pushed the older boy in what he, Kimimaro, would consider his best skill. The duel was fast, but Kimimaro could tell Naruto was attempting to incorporate some new elements. It hadn't been quite mastered yet, but when it was the Uzumaki would be a nightmare. His speed and power were excellent, but his nascent ability to transition from a downward slash to a thrust to a horizontal slash with just a change in his grip and wrist movement was impressive. Once mastered, he'd flow through defenses as he'd either be too fast or too hard to predict for most to stop his offense. Once Orochimaru called a halt to their fight, she informed them this would be a daily occurrence until the month was over and Kimimaro went back to Oto. Both boys acknowledged her words and Kimimaro was dismissed for the day, choosing to shower, change and then explore the village for a bit. While Naruto impressed him, he doubted most of the rest of this trash would. The village was too open for him, the general mood didn't seem befitting of a shinobi village. Civilians all about, concerned about very little and generally in the way, as far as he was concerned. Kimimaro wasn't used to this kind of atmosphere. Oto only had people who were of use to his Orochimaru-sama, and before that he spent his time in a cell, like an animal. He had to stop himself from thinking about his time with his clan. It always angered him, and anger would do him no good. They were all dead, so it didn't matter. As he traversed the village, he started to notice a shadow tailing him. Deciding against playing coy, he called it out to see a panther cub emerge and trot up to him. "Hi, why are you following me? Oni-chan said you might want some company since you didn't know anyone, and Konoha residents can be jerks. The trash of this village does not concern me," he said before turning around and continuing his walk, and noticed the cub walked right alongside him. "You can return to your summoner. I'm good," she said, not taking the hint. Kimimaro relented, figuring she'd be content to travel in silence. Nay, he was wrong. "Yes, what do you do for fun?" "Fun? I'm a warrior, I don't concern myself with fun." "That's stupid," the cub said. "That is not stupid, it is dedication. Oni-chan is dedicated and he still has fun. He plays ninja with some village kids and myself. The Uzumaki is not without skill, but he'd be better if he spent that time training. PFF'd, he could totally kick you in a real fight," she said, and then looked panicked when Kimimaro shot her a glare. He assumed it was the glaring that caused her reaction. "Don't tell Ni-chan I said a bad word, okay?" He was wrong again. "I'll consider it," he said, causing the summons to relax. He was curious why she was so concerned with the Uzumaki finding out about her word choice, but decided it was of little concern. "We should get some lunch, I know the perfect place." "Fine," Kimimaro said, and followed the cub to a small stand that served ramen. He learned the cub's name was Majila, and she apparently came to the stand a lot, enough to have a tab and be known by the chefs. Tsuki and Ayame were some of the few people to treat Naruto decently, so he ate at the stand a lot. As a consequence, Majila did as well. They didn't even hesitate to feed nor speak with her as if were an everyday occurrence. He paid little attention to the exchange until the expressive cub called him her Oni-chan's new friend. If he were one to do so, he would have snorted. He could respect the Uzumaki, but friends? Jugo was his only friend. He didn't see the need in another. However, the ramen chefs seemed excited and offered him a free bowl in thanks. Their gratitude mirrored Jugo's own, and Kimimaro was curious why it was of note that he'd be friends with, though he wasn't, the redhead. Granted, he knew very little of the Uzumaki's life. He never considered asking and assumed his mistress would give him all the information he needed. Now, he was curious. He offered to pay for the meal, but the chefs declined, saying Naruto leaves a balance in case Majila stops by, so it was covered. He decided to return, having seen enough of the village, and the small summons was right beside him. Letting his curiosity get the better of him, Kimimaro was forced to ask, "Why did those chefs find it noteworthy I'm friends with Naruto?" The villagers weren't very nice to him, many still aren't. They treat him like he isn't there, or, at the very least, like they wish he weren't. Almost no one wanted to befriend him, so he was alone a lot before he joined us Panthers. Then he was happy because he had friends. Interesting, Kimimaro thought, but said nothing else as the pair walked back to the manor. As Kimimaro was gone to explore the village, Orochimaru was continuing her training of her latest apprentice. She couldn't let go of the feeling he was hiding something significant from her, and without knowing the full extent of his abilities, she may be covering things he already knows instead of advancing him with new knowledge. It was time she got a full picture of what he could do. Having her snakes bind him was just to help loosen his lips. "You're holding back on me, Naruto-kun." "Huh," he said intelligently. Granted, he was, but how did she know that? "If I'm going to train you properly, I really need to know all you can do." Tai Kenjutsu I know, and you'll be at a higher level by the time we attack the Akatsuki, but I know ninjutsu is your strongest skill, so what are you hiding? Just a few things, but they are my trump cards. Also, the old man's Anbu is always watching and I don't want him to know. Naruto said. Seemingly, she approved of the sentiment as she had her snakes release him. As she released him, the Anbu appeared before them. You have no reason to fear my reporting your skills to the Sandaime. My orders were to protect you, not monitor you, especially as your original techniques all fall under clan techniques until stated otherwise. The Anbu swiftly disappeared after that. See, now, please, Naruto-kun, what have you been holding back? Well, first, I developed a yin release technique, but I only have one. It's an illusion. Please demonstrate it, she said, and watched as he hesitated before following her orders. 4 hand seals later and she saw a flash of light, and then her world turned black. The only source of color was a red moon in Naruto's red hair. However, his hair was longer, flowing down to the ground, and had become black at its ends. It kept growing until the ends became panthers, all coming from her. It surprised her when she felt actual pain from the bites, and it took a considerable flare to end the illusion. I call that my hunter's moon technique. Impressive. Similar to Tobirama's bringer of darkness. But that isn't all, is it? No, you should probably come by me, though. My control with this isn't where I'd like it to be. Orochimaru quirked an eyebrow but did as her student requested. He then promptly performed 8 hand seals and slammed his hand on the ground. She couldn't hear his vocalization but didn't have to wait long for the jutsu to emerge. 40 feet from them, she saw something amazing. Unbelievable, really. It rushed from the ground and spread to the sky. Even as far away as she was, she could feel the heat. She could only stare at her apprentice. He'd, seemingly, done the impossible. How? She asked, and he bashfully scratched the back of his head. His natural affinities are wind and water. She knows that for a fact. Kabuto is the best at what he does. It's really just phases of matter. Once you understand that, the trick just becomes molding the chakra. No big deal, really. The 2 senior ninja bearing witness to this couldn't have disagreed more vehemently. Itachi now understood why Naruto wanted to keep this secret. Orochimaru was simply beyond pleased. It seems she has something to learn from her student. She, of course, wasted no time relaying how delighted she was. If you were older, Naruto-kun, I'd have you right here and now until you begged for mercy twice. I've never begged for anything a day in my life. He retorted. Twice. She didn't seem to care. What do you call that, by the way? It's my lava style. Burning geyser. It was another team training session for Team 7 and the clear blue sky did not reflect the mood of the team. The Uchiha had changed recently. He'd lost his spark. It was obvious to every member of the team. His drive all but gone, everything he did was by rote, his body moving through the motions. Sakura was no help, as her history of trying to befriend, ensnare, console the last Uchiha always ended in failure. He dismissed her out of hand if it wasn't about missions. Sasuke respected Kakashi, as much as Sasuke respected anyone, but still could draw no comfort nor inspiration from the man. He was too remote, contrasting Sakura's extreme openness. Sasuke was the acknowledged leader of their pack, but he was faltering, and Kiba, his partner, could do little to help either. He'd taken the secondary position, so any challenge levied now would seem impotent. He'd given up being a true challenge early in their formation. Akamaru was concerned. If the team didn't function well, his partner was at risk, which meant he was at risk. He didn't fully understand why the Uchiha had lost his motivation, but it negatively affected all. He never liked the Uchiha. There was an omnipresent darkness in him. It had been focused and intense. While it's lost its intensity, the lack of focus makes it a possible contagion. Would he bring the rest of the team down, as he believed his emotions were somehow deeper than anyone else's? Would he turn violent as his depression gave way to anger? Akamaru didn't know, and the elders of his pack had very little to say on the matter. He was powerless to change things and could only be diligent in protecting his partner. It was all he could do. That and hope someone could reach the boy before he sunk in on himself completely or lashed out at others. Neither were ideal and both would be a waste of potential. "Come on, Akamaru, let's show Sasuke what's what," Kiba said with forced enthusiasm. Akamaru heeded his call all the same. The spar would likely have the same results they always did, but even if Kiba did win, he'd take no pride in it and Sasuke would feel no shame. This team was going nowhere fast. Of all the ways she had planned to spend her evening, having a civil discussion with Jiraiya was nowhere on the list. He claimed he'd come with important news concerning Naruto, so of course she prepared for another screed on how she was going to corrupt him and make him experiment on babies and kick puppies in her attempt to take over the world. She was in no mood and Naruto was kind enough to make dinner for everyone, including his fellow Uzumaki, Kimimaro, Majila and Kabuto, and she'd rather not miss that as it smelled divine. Now the two sat in her parlor, each in a leather chair staring at the other. "Make it quick," she said, neutrally. The cage is hinging his support with the Akatsuki on Naruto fighting Gaara in Suna. Sensei has agreed and we'll leave at month's end. Maybe Sensei should tell Rasa he'll help or I'll kill him myself. Oh, yes, the Orochimaru school of diplomacy. When in doubt, hold a sword to someone's throat. Jiraiya said dismissively. What's wrong with holding a sword to someone's throat? A lot gets accomplished by holding a sword to someone's throat. Well, as fun as this is, let me inform the brat so we can come up with a plan. No, he'll be fine. Gaara holds no challenge for him currently. I wasn't asking. Orochimaru narrowed her eyes. You keep at this, Jiraiya, and you won't like the consequence. You think you can keep me from my godson? You overestimate yourself. Sensei managed it and you didn't even put up a fight. I'm confident I can achieve similar results, if you push me. To think I felt bad after Tsunade's little story. You're just a bottomless void. I'm more certain than ever you belong nowhere near Naruto. And yet he lives with me and is being trained by me because he trusts me. No, because you plotted and schemed to make it happen. You may be getting away with this now, but it won't last forever. Leave, Jiraiya. Fine, I'll be back tomorrow to speak with Naruto, he said and made his way to the front door. She just rolled her eyes at the lifelong idiot. She joined the rest in the dining room where Naruto and Karen were just bringing out dinner. She was never one to enjoy group meals, but she had to admit seeing everyone talking and laughing, especially at Majila's retelling of her time with Kimimaro. It was much more relaxed than Oto, though she realized it's because she terrified everyone, giving the impression she was mercurial to the extreme. Good to keep a bunch of rogues in line, bad for dinner conversation. She paid special attention to her newest student and how he seemed to draw everyone in. He wasn't put off by Tayuya's language, could get Karen to open up, and even a stoic like Kimimaro was willing to engage. She knew he was something special, but mostly she focused on his potential as a shinobi. It was comforting to know she had chosen correctly and it was time to start moving things along. As the others cleared the table, Naruto was headed to the library, Majila underfoot, to do some studying, but Orochimaru had different plans. Naruto-kun, she said. Yes, Shisho, we need to discuss another part of your regimen, namely recovery. Recovery, yes. While most experienced ninja know to rest and some even visit hot springs occasional to relax their muscles, most don't pay enough attention to post-workout recovery. It limits their gains as they aren't taking care of their bodies. I won't let you make that same mistake, so take a hot bath and then go to your bedroom. You'll be receiving a massage afterward to make sure there's no tension in your muscles. The redhead simply nodded and headed toward the bathroom nearest his bedroom. After his soak, Naruto returned to his room to see it alight with candles and the smell of incense burning. He also saw a massage table and laid on high, face down. He had not suspected the person to give him the massage to be Orochimaru herself, as he tensed when he noticed her presence. This only caused her to laugh as she told him to relax. It was weird, Outside of sparring, Naruto wasn't accustomed to much in the way of physical contact, so even ordinary acts to most people felt intimate to him, so this was doubly so. Orochimaru paid attention to his initial discomfort. Part of the reason she chose to do this was to get him used to her touch so she wouldn't have to later. Also, it was a chance to make him start seeing her as an object of affection and not just a teacher as he had clearly labeled Kurenai. She started at his legs and methodically worked her way up. He did have a great deal of tension in his muscles and knots to work out, so it wasn't completely manipulative. 60/40ths she'd wager. By the time she'd gotten to his back he'd relaxed completely, no doubt in part to the incense which were made of a little something extra. It'd also, most likely, give him an interesting dream tonight. He was asleep before she finished, leaving her to place him in bed. She watched as he slept peacefully. Truly, he was beautiful in her eyes. Not just aesthetically, though she reasoned he'd be quite attractive when he matured instead of just boyishly cute now, but it was his potential and drive she saw. It was similar to Jiraiya. When they were kids she'd seen his potential that was just begging to be unleashed. If he had not been a jealous, petty boy, she'd have continued to be interested in him. Naruto would be greater still and hold none of Jiraiya's inferiorities. He broke the rules of ninjutsu and apparently had been working on his lava release for almost 2 years, all in secret. Ice release as well, after seeing it in action during a mission. Phases of matter, she remembers him saying. Simple in conception, not execution, but he was right. If you can make water vapor, and viscous liquids, then ice should be possible. If you can make earth, mud and stone, then lava should be possible. She, like others, assumed only bloodlines could truly wield the sub-elements, but she was wrong. Because no one was there to tell him he couldn't, Naruto truly believes chakra is limitless potential, energy to be manipulated, and he'll go farther than any before him. That, she believed, was his beauty. Until she was around him, exposed to him. He has a lightness to him, one that shouldn't be there. He's within his rights to hate much of the village or simply deem life unfair and not care about anything, but he doesn't. She's seen him genuinely enjoy others. She was drawn to it even if it'd be something she'd seek to quash, bend or otherwise eliminate from others. But with him, she'd protect it as she sees that quality and his potential is intrinsically linked. His belief in chakra mirrors his belief in himself and his innate optimism. Not naivete but true optimism that he can improve things if he doesn't give up. It's intoxicating, so much so she has to remind herself not to rush things. He's still too young, so she must be patient, and she will, but one day Naruto Uzumaki will be hers and hers alone. Even if she has to burn the rest of the world to make it happen. Not Jiraiya, not Hiruzen, no one will stop her. She gives Naruto a small kiss on the cheek and departs, knowing more is in store once he gets old enough. She just has to wait. A dark forest illuminated by the waxing crescent. The foliage is familiar, the dewy scents are as well. His only question is how he got here. Well, and where he got these clothes. Over a mesh-lined black shirt was some red armor he'd never seen before. Over that he was wearing a black haori with red and blue flames at the bottom. He can't see it, but a red Uzumaki swirl lies at the center of his back. His sword is strapped to his back and he has his kunai holsters strapped to each leg. His black pants, strapped with crimson tape at the ankles, and his black shinobi sandals finish the look. He has no more time to think about his clothing as a tidal wave comes toward him, uprooting the trees in its way. He wastes no time performing a series of hand seals and immediately unleashes a strong blast of wind, one powerful enough to cleave the tidal wave in two, splitting so none of the water hits him. In the distance he sees a figure running toward him with great speed. As the figure gets closer, he sees the glow of Raiden chakra contained in some type of blade. Finally, he can make out the figure. It's Tobirama Senju, and he's wielding the Raiden no Ken. Naruto sprinted toward the Hokage with great speed himself, able to perform the full Shukuchi without any ill effects. Tobirama readied himself, bringing his lightning blade overhead, preparing to deliver a powerful strike. Naruto draws his blade, smooth and without mistake, coating it with his supersonic chakra. The two blades meet in the middle and neither give way to the other. Naruto placed his left hand on the hilt, now gripping with both as Tobirama is much stronger than him, but that will be to his benefit. Naruto spun, allowed Tobirama's forward momentum to carry him forward while tries to horizontally slash his back, but the Senju was more than ready for that and swiftly blocked the strike with his own blade. Naruto jumped back to give himself some space and the two combatants eyed each other. Without a word to the two re-engaged, but there were few sword clashes, their dance performed in near-perfect silence. He was the better technical swordsman, but technique can be overwhelmed by physical superiority and experience, something the Nadaime had in spades. This was leaving Naruto on the defensive more than he would like, but it couldn't be avoided. He knew he had to be patient, to find a true opening and exploit it for all it's worth. It took a few moments, but he finally saw it, a hole in Tobirama's offense. Naruto promptly charged forward with a thrust of his blade, the speed surprising the former Hokage, and just as Naruto was about to score a blow, Tobirama vanished. Hiraishin the redhead thought and swiftly turned to where he believed the follow-up attack would come, bringing his sword down. He was met with a clang, but it was not Tobirama's Raijin that stopped his blade but a tri-pointed kunai. Blue eyes met blue eyes as Naruto stood in front of one of his longtime idols and his father, Minato Namikaze. Without preamble, the Yondaime went for a leg sweep and Naruto jumped back. It was a mistake as the Yondaime kicked him whilst he was in midair, causing the smaller Uzumaki to fly back and roll until he got back to his feet. Minato launched 3 of his signature kunai and Naruto knew he'd be overwhelmed if they got near him, so he tried something, an experiment he hadn't perfected yet. He coated his blade with his supersonic chakra flow and swung his blade, creating blades that flew through the air. He managed to sever the shiki of 2 of the kunai but missed the one, his control over the technique failing at some point. The kunai landed beside him and he jumped forward, turning to face the opposite direction, hoping he predicted right. He didn't. He tried to swing his blade where he thought his father might flash to, but he guessed wrong and was punched in the stomach for his trouble. The hit was hard enough to make him drop his blade and Naruto shunshined away, but another tri-tip kunai was in hot pursuit. Naruto landed on a tree branch, one of the few not taken out by the Nadaime's water jutsu. To his dismay, as soon as he landed he heard a thud. On instinct he sent a great deal of chakra to his left hand, turning toward his right. Rasengan met Rasengan as father and son battled for dominance. Minato eventually released his and grabbed Naruto's wrist with the same hand. Before he could think, Naruto was no longer on a tree but hanging over a cliff. He looked up to his father, who was dangling him, and the man smiled before releasing Naruto's wrist and letting him fall. It was darker, he could see nothing but black as not even the moonlight penetrated. His fall felt never-ending until he landed on something soft. He was on a bed and in a room with sporadic spots of candle light. The scent was familiar but he couldn't quite recall what it was, but he was very comfortable. He decided to close his eyes. The 2 former Hokage had pushed him hard and he needed to rest. Kukuku, he heard the familiar laugh and shot up, turning to see his new sensei, in a dark red kimono. Her nail polish matched the color of the kimono and he could see a faint trace of lipstick. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun and the candle light accented the complexion of her skin nicely. She was, in short, beautiful, desirable in a way Naruto hadn't thought another person could be. Her sauntering over to him, pace deliberately slow, didn't help matters as he saw the sway in her hips and the slip bounce of her. He was feeling things he couldn't put words to. Like some long-lost knowledge he couldn't quite remember, an impression he should be doing something with her. When she finally made it to the bed and claimed his lips, the picture became a little clearly. Acting on instinct he returned the kiss, mimicking her motions. His hands around her waist but decidedly unhappy with their lack of activity. As if they had a will of their own, they started to undo her purple obi and he felt her smile. Taking that as a cue to continue he slipped his hands in her now loosened kimono. each making the slow climb toward her. He was enjoying the feel of his skin, slightly cool to the touch, and wanted to savor it. Before he could reach his intended goals, she broke off the kiss and pushed him back so he was lying flat on the bed. She then mounted him, smiling as she started to slowly drop the kimono from her shoulders. So entranced he could only stare at her eyes until he realized she was topless. Daring to break eye contact, his vision drifted down, once again noticing her red lips and then her slender neck. Just as he was about to lay eyes on her, he felt a thud. And then another. And another. "Wake up, Oni-chan. I'm up, I'm up," Naruto near shouted, confusion and irritation warring within him. "Good, it's time for training. Okay, I'll start getting ready," he said before noticing a certain stiffness which caused him to blush. "After I take a cold shower,